Valeria Lipovetsky, welcome to Live from Bed.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. Like I said when we first hopped on, I really feel like I know you because I followed your journey for so long.
It's been a journey.
Do people still call you Valeria?
Yeah.
Do people get your name wrong?
Yes, all the time. And honestly, it's not, I get it. It's a harder name to pronounce.
Is it?
Yeah, because I feel like people think about Valerie, right? So, and then
Oh, sure.
So when I moved actually to North America, it was literally 6 months of people calling me Valerie until I was like, okay, no, that's not my name. My name is Valeria. And then I started doing this thing where it's like malaria with a V because I couldn't get another, maybe like not a deadly disease. But that's what came up for me. So I was using the malaria for a long time, but now I feel like more people say it correctly.
I'm glad I don't live with you because I would get confused with your son, Jake. Jake, Jane, and Jade are like all the same name, but very different.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like I'm growing up in a sense because I've started actually correcting people. Usually I've just like settled for the Jane, but Jane is so different than Jade, So I'm just like, I'm starting to express myself and it's the journey.
No, that's a huge milestone. Are you kidding me? That's like that adulting milestone. You're like, oh, I can correct people about my name now.
Wait, so you have 2 sons with a cold right now?
Yes, 2 out of 3. It's something. That's why with the technical difficulties, you just, of course it will happen. Why not?
You're like, I'm at my wit's end. I'm about to snap. Wait, so who's left? You have 3 sons. So you're one of your sons is left, your husband is left, and you are left.
Yes.
Who are you most afraid of getting sick next?
Well, Jake, the eldest, was sick and got everyone sick. And the other 2 sick because they're literally coughing at each other's face. So it's a matter of time. I think I'm the most scared of Gary being sick because the man cold is a real thing and they go down the hardest.
They go down the hardest and it is like they've never been sick before and that they will never live to see another day.
Exactly. And I just don't have the capacity to entertain that right now.
Are children men, yeah, whatever you call those, boys, are they just as dramatic as their adult counterparts?
No, I feel like they don't know that they can manipulate the situation like adults do, like men, like older men.
Right.
Like they know, like my husband knows that this is his time to really, lean into it, where kids are just like, whatever, but I want to go outside and I want to play games. They have things to do. Don't like sit with it for too long. But to be honest with you, though, I have to confess, when I get sick, I started really like enjoying it. I don't want to get but when I do, I'm just like, it's vacation time, catching up on all the movies and all the shows. Like no one comes near me. It's pretty, I enjoy it.
There's a fine line because I just obviously am in bed just for everything, but there's a fine line between like it being your choice and not. You know what I mean? When you're just like fully laid up, you're like, fuck my life. And it takes all the fun out of being in bed. Because that's what I'm worried about. And that actually is a great launching point for what I really want to talk to you about. Because like, that's what I'm afraid of about having kids. Because I have no kids yet. And I'm like, will I ever be alone? I recharge by being alone. Are you ever alone?
I'm the same way. I absolutely recharge when I'm alone. Am I ever alone? Yes, because I started like demanding that alone time. But
yeah,
it took me time to learn how to ask for it and then learn how to demand it. And then, be at a place where I see that we reached a point where the kids are old enough where I can actually make it happen. Because I think it's unrealistic to expect, young mothers to get that space. I think it's changing though. I saw this study the other day, which is very interesting, where Gen Z moms say that they get at least 1 hour a day for themselves, which I feel millennials can say, or any other mothers from any other generation can say that. And I think that is also because of now there's a more of a fair split of home responsibilities between men and women. So things are changing. Maybe it depends how you like lay down the law.
Okay, so I really want to talk to you about just like where I'm at right now with like having kids and everything, because I do notice even in my daily chores and things like that, like I have to actually like take a deep breath and like condition myself to allow my husband to do certain things because I do it better. I just do it better. I do it quicker. I do it easier. And I'm like, I have to just let him do it or else he'll never do it.
Absolutely. We teach them and we allow them to lean into certain behaviors, and it's totally up to us. My mom always said when I was growing up, she always said, the man may be the head, but the woman is the neck. So, you gotta make sure that it moves in the right direction, that it has the right support. So I feel like in the beginning of my relationship, I did it in a very like traditional way where, okay, you go and you work and I'll take care of everything else. We had help. So like I had nothing to complain about, but it's beyond that. It's just like, it's the ability to your point, let them do it their way and be okay with it. That's also something
Incorrectly. No, I'm just
incorrectly over and over again. And
Yeah.
be like, okay, this is great, honey. You're so good. Thank you so much. It's also a thing that we have to develop, honestly.
Okay, so you're 33 now, right?
Yeah.
So you're born in 1990. I was born in 93. I just turned 30 in December. And I'm, here I am.
Are you loving?
Little did I know it was like where I've been meant to be my entire life. I'm like, oh, okay, finally. But I related to so much of what you said, like recently when you were saying like when I'm 33 or, in my 30s, I finally feel like I'm able to advocate for myself. I know what I want. I have more of a voice. And I think while that's wonderful, there is this small fraction of regret that you have about it not happening sooner, about all the years you wasted letting your boundaries get violated, all the years that you didn't spend like saying what you actually felt. And I think that's hard not to get caught up on. But you have a career where all of that is out on the internet. Same thing. Like those episodes are recorded, whether I like it or not, of me not having firm boundaries, of me being not sure of who I was and afraid of being too much, not cool enough, all of that. How do you manage that?
I think that the regret part, I've learned how to let it fuel me rather than, throw me into a spiral. To your point, we both know, everyone knows that, all the things and everything we didn't know and all the mistakes we made obviously brought us to this point where we do know and we do better. But yes, it's a hard truth that all these things, the missed opportunities come up often, especially when you're kind of not in charge of your own, mental state. You kind of find yourself thinking about the most random events that happen that you're just like, I should have said not that.
Every night for me.
Usually at night, exactly.
Yeah.
At night when you're supposed to get your beauty sleep. I do find that I've learn to let it really like motivate me and put urgency into the way I do things and the intention behind them. And when I am put in positions of like, oh, this is going to be an event that I'll think about in the future, I remember the young Valeria and I'm like, I'm not going to make more mistakes again. So, here I am showing up as a more, wiser version of myself. So I do think that there's a way to truly enjoy all those regrets, if that makes sense.
Oh, I like that. Like enjoying certain regrets. Yeah, because it's like, I think we convince ourselves, we create all these narratives about what other people think, right? We're like, oh, other people have it figured out way earlier than we do, and they might be faking it till they make it. I feel like when we land is when we're supposed to land, but there is this feeling of like, oh, I wish I'd stood up for that younger version of me better. But I think you're right. Like that's all part of it. We wouldn't be where we're at without all of those would've, could've, should've's, in our past.
Absolutely. And, even today, the young generation today is so much wiser because obviously they have exposure to so many other people and tools, and they learn how to advocate themselves way earlier than we ever did. I mean, I even see my kids. I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Like they're claiming their personalities and who they are, and they are very well versed in boundaries.
When I watched your son on your podcast, I literally was like, is this child Benjamin Button? Like, is he an 80-year-old trapped in a child's body? Like the way he was like, I wanted to be someone else. I was like, that was me last year.
I know. Yeah. 100%. But that's what I'm saying. It's like now they are getting more and more connected to that part of themselves, and it's beautiful, but they're going to have their own regrets. They're going to make their own, mistakes that they will get their regrets in one way or another. So I think it's
totally.
I feel like it's part of the game with youth. And I'm just so freaking happy that I'm in my 30s, where I'm just like past that point of just the cluelessness of, existing in the world. And then have been more of an understanding what's going on.
I'm really not just saying this because you're sitting in front of me right now. Like, if someone were to ask me, irrespective of our meeting, who is someone that really inspires you from a motherhood standpoint, you really do. Because, like, I think for me, where I'm at right now is I'm a year married and I like want to have kids. I know that I want to have them someday. Every day is like tomorrow or in 2 years. Like, it changes. But I think there's so much pressure around what my life should look like before that, who I should be before that, what I should have figured out before that. Not to mention all of the the reckoning that you have to do with your childhood and who you are, and like how that can impact someone else's entire life. And I think for me, I kind of viewed marriage in a similar way, which was kind of incorrect. Like, when my husband and I were planning our wedding and everything, when we were engaged, I was nagging him nonstop because I think I thought the drawbridge closed the second we got married, that no one would ever change again, that whatever habits or patterns we were in right now was going to be like ours forever. And I feel like that a little bit about having kids, right? Like, I want to be perfect as much so as I can before I impact someone else's life. I'm so concerned with feeling ready. And I love that you actually today, like just a few hours ago, posted that ready is more of a decision than a feeling. Because when people say, oh, you're never ready, you're like, well, fuck, I feel like I should feel a little more ready than this.
Yeah.
But by the time you were my age, you had 3 boys.
Yeah.
And you've had this larger than life career. You are so self-realized, and your growth has just been so apparent. And I think that for me is so refreshing to see, because I'm so riddled with this anxiety about getting it right or feeling ready and when I want to do this. Mm-hmm. When you had your first son, how old were you?
I had Jake at 22.
Okay. Yep. So at 22, were you thinking what is everyone else doing? Is this right? Is this wrong?
I really didn't, because I was in a completely different headspace.
Yeah.
I met Gary, my husband, and it's just everything kind of clicked for me. And I'm not sure. I can't even tell you why. I didn't overthink the shit out of it. I really didn't. And that's my natural inclination in general. I just overthink. So it was interesting now looking back how I didn't sabotage this relationship, this marriage, having all these kids, because obviously at 22, I didn't know who I was, let alone able to feel ready to have a child. But I think that the fact that I had this immense connection, trust, and safety with my husband, I think that really helped me go through this process without questioning it. It just felt right. There's no other way to explain it. If I had to sit down and do a pro and cons, I would have probably had a lot of cons, but I just didn't feel the need to even have that. You know what I mean?
So interesting, because I think so much of it is yes, we are I am an overthinker. I think many people listening are overthinkers. And, when you have that confidence in your partner, you think, okay, whatever shortcomings I have, they have other incredible things that they're going to bring to the table. And it's not just me. What I realized recently, in my own therapy and work, is that it's not my husband who I'm afraid of parenting with. It's myself, because there are so many promises and chains that I want to break, and so much pressure on myself to get it right and to fix the parts of my childhood that weren't right. Or, and the complex thing that you get into when you are old enough is you realize that for every negative thing about your childhood, there are also so many positives. So then you're in a real mind fuck, and you're like, okay, I actually can't plan for anything, because no matter what, even if I have all these chains I want to break, there's going to be a blind spot. Were there any promises that you made to yourself that either surprised you because you didn't keep, or that you had to modify in some way? Did you put a lot of pressure on yourself for the mother you were going to be?
Honestly, I think that having kids that young made me, and back then, I mean, Jake is 11 now. 11 years ago, I wasn't spending 8 hours scrolling on the internet following moms I wanted to be like, or doing like what everyone is doing. That wasn't the environment. So I didn't even have the opportunity to know what's out there. I just knew it from my close circle. I knew it from my childhood. I, knew the way I wanted to parent from my mother, but also way I didn't want to parent from my mother. So that was the influence that I had. And thank God, because I don't know how people today make decisions in general, let alone having children, getting married, but freaking like what milk brand are we buying? Like the consumer paradox, or there's a name for it, the buyer's paradox, whatever it is, it's real, right? The choice. And the more you know, although we see at all these things, we see it as like, oh, that's such amazing, valuable information to have, but it also fucks with our minds. So back then, I didn't have all these thoughts from what everyone else is doing. The only thoughts that I had is just like, okay, how am I going to do things differently with my motherhood and in my parenting journey that I felt I didn't get in my own childhood? So those are some of the things that I thought about. But I didn't sink too deep into it. I don't know. I think it was just like, I'm going to love this child. I'm giving this child a safe, like stable environment. And that honestly was already more than I had. So for me, I was like, I'm already at a really great starting point.
Totally. I think like that whenever I, express all these concerns, people are like, some people don't think about it at all. So like the fact that you are trying to go into it intentionally and with love is great. I think like I said, I'm afraid to parent with myself because I'm like, I'm so afraid of messing up at all. And like the amount of like self-forgiveness that will take. Even if I do something that's moderately like something that I didn't want to repeat from my childhood, I will have this insane amount of shame and guilt. Did you ever feel like that?
Every day. Every day, there are instances in the day where I respond a certain way or say something, and I'm like, that's going to be a trauma.
Yeah.
Just creating trauma for you. Like, I know it. And I come to terms with the fact that, especially having 3 of them, each and every one of them will have a different kind of, reception of how I parent, and they're going to experience it in different ways. I think I've become much, much kinder with myself and to myself throughout the years, because I just realized that this is part of it. This is part of them establishing their character. This is part of them like feeling maybe there's some kind of like trauma created, but then it will give them an opportunity to maybe find strengths or solutions within themselves that they wouldn't have found any other way. Because I know that's what made me who I am, right? Like I can say, my mother can attest it to herself that she made a lot of mistakes, but yet, I'm pretty proud, and she's pretty proud of how I came up. So I just think that now that I have older kids, I actually think about how can I create more opportunities for them to struggle, because the struggle is different now. Back then when I was growing up with a single mother in a foreign country, she had to think how to put food on the table. For us, that's not the struggle. So how do I create a struggle that will get them to be motivated to learn more about themselves and to push themselves forward, and to, there's a lot of that they need to do. So actually now I'm at the point where it's like, okay, how can we damage them? Like just a little damage, like a wide damage,
A little spice, a little like seasoning. That's where I'm at. Throughout my entire 20s, I was like, I'm going to do this different than my parents. I'm going to do that different than my parents. And then I swear, like around late 20s, like to now, I've thought to myself, so much of my sense of humor is from my trauma. So many of the people that I gravitate towards are people that have been through something in some capacity. But it is like this hard thing. And I think so much of what I'm getting hung up on is thinking that all of this is conscious and in my control.
No.
When like, I know the second, right? Like you have a kid, you're like, oh, actually this thing is in my home. Like they're going to see my every single imperfection and mood.
I want to tell you, I don't want it to scare you any further, but you will see yourself in ways that you've never seen yourself before. Like like talk about going to therapy. You can go to all the therapists and do all the work, and it obviously is going to position you in a much better place, a place of enlightenment and self-awareness, but it will not remove the amount of lessons you're going to learn through your children. It's
Right.
actually mind-boggling how much of a mirror they are to every single piece of you.
And I feel like you're approaching those ages where they're real, like that feedback is constant, and they're like saying that you do things like things that you didn't even know that you didn't appreciate about yourself. You're like, all of a sudden I need to change this and that. So much of it is just, it's life. It's like they're in your house as much as your furniture. They're there. So they're going to experience your good, bad, and ugly. Was there one specific moment, like when you first had Jake or even later, where you had to practice the most forgiveness and like self-acceptance?
I mean, I think to this day, we talk with Gary often about the fact that, they're all three very different personalities, but I do see how certain aspects of Jake is the result of our parenting. Like we were first time parents, we were very anxious, everything had to be perfect. We put so much pressure on ourselves. We were very frustrated. And I do see how that stayed with him in a
Isn't that crazy?
capacity, where with our third, with Maximus, he's just a freaking flake in the sky. Like he's just, life is beautiful and he knows how to regulate himself. And he's just, because we are different, right? So
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see the contrast. But again, I see that the way Jake is and kind of like the lingering effects of how we were as parents are also actually some of his biggest strengths. So it's kind of this always, this game that you play.
Yeah, because I'm one of four and I'm the baby. So I always have an affinity towards the baby. I feel like by your third, you're such a different parent.
That's so different.
What I'm worried about and what you are a complete example of, like, actually, like, why I shouldn't worry is I think when you have a baby or you think of, starting a family, you think your life as you know it is going to end. And I think there's part of that that's true. But I think you think that there's a lot of limiting beliefs. Like, I'm not going to be able to have the career I want. I can't be as selfish. I can't be all of these things. And I think because you didn't have to necessarily think about all of that, because you were just like, I'm living. I'm going to have this child and they're going to come along with me. What do you say to someone that's 30 that's thinking of starting a family and like afraid of losing everything?
I think that, I share the truth. The truth is that you do lose an identity, and there's definitely a mourning process to it as well, which I actually make a point to talk about it with women, because you don't really talk about it as much. You don't hear about it as much. For most women, the way it's been told forever is you have a baby and you're just the happiest and it's this bundle of joy and you just like find a new meaning in life. For some women, it is. I remember I had a conversation with Jessica Alba, and she's like, I found myself through motherhood, where for me, I actually lost myself in motherhood. So every woman experiences it's so different. And I think it's a beautiful thing because I lost myself, but then I could start from zero and build myself up, this new identity, this new reiteration of who I am. And it was a beautiful process, painful, long, difficult, tiring, but beautiful, because kids gave me a whole other sense of who I am. So I think that happens a lot. So life doesn't end, to kind of, to say what you said, life ends as you know it.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. Like, that's actually a positive, because this new life is a whole new phase of discovering different sides of you, different sides of life. You learn to enjoy different things. You get to experience different things. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I think that it's important to remember that there's also a lot of seasons in life. In general, for women, there's so many seasons for us. And if it's, pre-babies, and then you're in your 20s, and then you're in your 30s, and then you're a mother, and then there's always something. And motherhood, when you have babies, is completely different season than when you have kids like my age now, or teenagers, or every time there's going to be something new, something different. So I think for me, when I think about an advice that I wish I've learned or I heard from someone was to not attach to a version of myself or of the life that I'm experiencing right now, because it is ever evolving. And I think a lot of the suffering that happens is us resisting that, you know?
And I think you want to get it right. And that, like, the real answer of life is that there's no right way to do anything. And I think you learn that with each year you grow older. The way that Dylan and I fight is different. I grew up in a house where we did not fight, meaning we had arguments, but it was deep, and then resentment would build, and then we would go to a therapy session and hash it all out, right? Like, I grew up in proper LA, you know, bizarre. Like, we were not like rupture and repair constantly. I never saw my parents fight until they were getting divorced. No, it's crazy. My husband is from, they'll yell at each other over a bagel at breakfast. And like, my nervous system, like, I'm like, you know, like, I'm having a heart attack because they're like, that, you know, that, like, they just are loud. They're passionate. They love hard. They fight hard. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always like, okay, wait. How do I navigate this? How do I feel about this? Do I want to fight in front of my kids? Because every time I would say no one ever fought in front of me, people would be like, oh, that's so great. You know, your parents are so great. And I'm like, well, they got divorced. So like, you know, what is the right way to do that? And I think like similarly, I've heard you talk about how, you know, your mom and your stepdad would talk about money, and it was such a focal point of your upbringing and how you always hated how much it was talked about and thought about. And I like money is a similar thing for me. Like, money was never talked about in my family. And it's like, what is right? You like get all mixed up because you're like, what part of your childhood do I want to take? Where would you say that you guys are now? Do you fight differently every time you fight? Do you have like general rules?
So we, in general, from the beginning of our relationship, we didn't really raise our voices at each other.
Okay.
I'm from also a household where my mother goes from 0 to 100, like in a split second.
Yeah.
And there is, in a way, that's also how I need to communicate sometimes, just to like release it. But Gary just, both of us just never really communicated in that way. But what was interesting to me, a few years back, I remember last year even, I remember we were having a discussion or disagreement of some kind, and I raised my voice, and Jake ran into the room and he's like, are you getting a divorce? And I was like, no. So I actually told Gary, we need to showcase a bit more of, you know, different kind of styles of disagreements, because I don't want their nervous system to flare up just because my voice is raised, because people will raise their voices and it's not always like a, you know, worst case scenario. So that actually taught me to communicate with my kids more, because I sat them down. I was like, listen, you know, I'm very passionate about this topic. I needed to raise my voice in order to make my point, but no one's getting a divorce. And, you know, now the way we communicate around them, we obviously keep it very respectful, because that's very important. I don't want to demean him in front of the kids and do that with me. But yeah, if there is a heated argument, I also say it like, I feel very passionate about this, so my kids can connect the dots. But it definitely changed after that feedback. I was like, I don't want them to, you know, feel threatened whenever a little note goes up. So it's very interesting how, you know, that also developed on its own.
Yeah, I think that's important that you had that modification like after, because I think some people would be like, oh, let's never fight, so they never think we're getting divorced. Because with my husband, when we were first fighting, when we were first dating, and like you and your husband, I started dating my husband when I was really young. And when we would first fight, we'd get in a fight and I would be packing his bags. I'd be like, what's my life going to be like single? Like, I was not used to rupture and repair. So every time we'd fight, it felt like the end. And I still like have that reflex 100%, because I'm like, oh, you only fight when shit is awful.
Yeah.
You know, but there is that fine line. Like, I like when you said, like, we don't say demeaning things to each other, because there is that fine line of being passionate about something versus being cruel.
Yeah.
That's so hard, because also when you get into a marriage, you become responsible in a lot of ways for a pain you didn't create. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's things that Dylan, or my husband, like finds triggering in our relationship that I'm like, that's just normal. But to him, it has such a deeper meaning because of the way that his parents parented him or their relationship. Is it hard to navigate whose parenting should win in a certain moment? Do you have those discussions behind closed doors? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, there are times where I can disagree with the way Gary, goes about a situation. I used to actually disagree on in that instance. So the kid,
Yeah.
be like, I don't think you're right. And he had to have a really, serious conversation with me. Don't disagree with me in front of the kids. And I totally understood. Like that makes sense to me because we are a united front. Because these kids are little, little manipulative.
They're smart. Yeah.
They know how to get in there. So, that taught me a lesson. But there are still situations where if I disagree with him, I'll take him aside and we communicate. And then either he sees my point and he's like, you know what, you're right. He'll goes back, apologize to the kid or talk to them, or he explains to me like, listen, this is why I said what I said, and this is why I think it's correct. And it's for me to be like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. So it's always this like communication. And a lot of the times I don't necessarily know if it's right or wrong. I can just share how I feel. But again, how I feel is how I feel from my own childhood, from my own experiences. So this constantly this, talking and trying to align and be in the same kind of, level of understanding how to go about a situation. But it's always dynamic. It's always changing.
God, truly. Like, I think that would be so hard because even just from the money example, right, where you grew up and it was talked about and you wanted to not have that in your kids' lives, then I'm sure you wonder, are we talking about it enough?
I'm still trying to figure out kind of my money mindset, and I'm learning to respect it more because for the longest time, I was very proud of the fact that, I don't care about money. I don't care about material things. It doesn't control me. Where in reality, it was kind of a toxic relationship. Like you can be not controlled by money, but still respected, right? It's just like to an end rather than like the whole what you live for. So I'm still learning how to unlearn certain things and certain behaviors. But I was talking yesterday with a friend of mine, and we're talking about how our kids are growing up in such different environments. We came from immigrant parents. Like we saw them go in and do everything they needed to do to put us on our feet. Our kids are completely living in a bubble, and we always demonizing, by the way. Like even when we meet people that come from money, we're always like, oh, must be easy, whatever. So there's always kind of like an aspect of, the kids with the money, they have their own fucked up choices.
Yeah, there's just assumptions that you make about the other side or like however you didn't grow up.
But for me, what I was so curious about is, I met a few people that come from wealth, and I actually love the fact that money is not this like black cloud over their heads.
Right.
Because like they've learned to find motivation from other places, not just from money. Where we come from, a place where we need money, we need to be, because we don't want to end up on the streets. This is a completely different mindset, and their way of living. Like there's this lightness to the way they move because they're not controlled by money. They can be controlled by other things, but it's money. And both Gary and I, we both come from homes that, money is this like mind fuck in a way because we're constantly making sure that we have enough, and that it's always this feeling of unlearning this feeling of lack. But I just wonder, like kids that come from those households, like how is it to move in the world being like, you don't have to think about it?
I didn't necessarily have to think about it as a kid, for sure. Now I have to worry about it. So like it took a lot of learning on my end that I wish I'd done younger. Like there was a certain aspect of my parents, their goal was to have me and my siblings not have to make decisions or find partners based on how much money they made or whatever, look for it to save them. But at the same time, it was this unspoken thing that was like kind of taboo, and there wasn't a lot of transparency. So like my husband would have to be like teach me a lot of shit that I didn't know before. And there's like all the, like while I didn't have to worry about that, there is this underbelly, especially of growing up with money in Los Angeles, that is like all the stuff that you're hiding, all of the stuff that is concealed by the money. And you learn all these other things. And I'm like, oh, I realize now what the money hid and what it was and why I'm so now like I need it, because I was like, as a child, that was the constant. That was the thing that was okay. And now as I'm like trying to create my own career and have my own money, and I want my kids to have a certain, access to certain things, I'm like, oh, now I'm seeing that this thing that I thought was just a purely enjoyable experience, like I didn't have things about it. Now I'm like, oh, actually that was I relied on it for consistency, and it was the third parent when like my other parents weren't available. And like that's a toxic relationship also. So I just feel like with money, like there's just toxicity. I'm friends with a lot of people that like work for their parents and have that whole thing and are in the shadow of their parents. And I don't know, it's hard because then you're like, I've never met anyone with a healthy relationship with money.
I mean, now that you mention it, yeah, you know what, you're right. I appreciate you sharing your point of view, because I agree. Obviously, I see an aspect of, one aspect of it that for me is triggering, but I'm sure that again, there's a whole other underlying, issues that come with ease of living just because there is money. So
no, I do. I want to acknowledge there is this aspect that, yeah, me and my siblings were extremely lucky to not have to worry about like when the next, how we were going to pay for something or all of that. 150%. I can't replicate that for my kids because I'm in a different financial position than my parents were in. So now I'm trying to I'm having to meet money in a new way as an adult and like reestablish this relationship with it and like also heal my relationship with it at the same time. And it's like, it's a mind fuck.
Yeah, it's its own journey, and we don't think about it often. We don't talk about it. It's obviously not taught in school, but it's such a huge part of our society. I mean, we live in a capitalist society, and in general, like it's one of there's no way around it. You need money to survive in the world. And
right.
Seeing how we've never really learned how to approach it and how to unlearn certain behaviors. For me, if I really think about any money conversations that I've learned, that I've seen growing up, is like The Secret, where you lie on the bed and you're envisioning dollars in the ceiling. And I'm like, that's not good. I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, but back to like kind of our bigger conversation, I think, especially with my parents, that is all they wanted. That was the chain that they wanted to break.
Right.
What for you was like the biggest chain you wanted to break?
I mean, for me, the biggest chain was probably the partner that I chose, because I from my mother being a very, very strong woman, almost too strong, if you ask me, but because there was just no other choice, she very much picked men that she felt she could fix. And to me, that was my biggest thing, where I didn't want to choose a partner and, someone to parent with that I'll constantly have to treat like another child, to be honest. So for me, that was a big thing I wanted to break. In general, I think we've had it for generation in our family. And I didn't know my biological father, so I grew up with this feeling that, men are not someone to rely on. And if shit hit the fan, they will run away. So when I met Gary, and I think that the reason why I didn't overthink this is because I felt this insane amount of safety that healed my, child self, and felt like I'm breaking a curse here,
Yeah. No, and I don't want people to misunderstand, because there's always going to be things that you want to change, or, you want them to clean this better or help you in this way. Of course. That's what's always stuck out to me, because I think now everyone's looking for a recipe, right? Everyone's looking for a guide, a way to how to find the best partner, how to know, because there are times that you are like, did I make the right decision? Did I do this right? With every aspect of your life. I think if you actually like the person that they are, you're so right. You can never love someone into having a better self-esteem. There are things that you just cannot
No,
change.
absolutely. And I did ask myself the question, will I want my children to be like this man, like his values, carry his, morals? And absolutely a yes. So for me,
Yeah.
it was an easy choice to make.
What would you say are certain ways, or even the biggest way, that you have changed since you and Gary met?
I mean, something that I felt when I also met Gary and when we started dating, I was very excited to develop as a person in his presence because I felt
Mm.
he'll be able to support and even push me outside of my comfort zone, right? At the end of the day, I wanted to become the best version of myself in order for, our marriage to be amazing because that's all I can do. I
Mm.
wasn't sitting there being like thinking how I'm going to improve him. I was thinking about how he can improve me. So then that inspire him to improve himself. Because at the end of the day, that's the biggest gift we can give to each other, right? The motivation and the showing up for ourselves every single day. It really is what it is. So longevity in a relationship to me is was really big on that. And I think that I was aware, he was aware, he's older than me. He was aware that I'm going to change drastically from the 21-year-old that I was when we got married to the 33 to the, whatever other versions I have coming up for him. But he was aware of it. And I respect him immensely for being able to step away and kind of let me do my thing, even though some of those things he's already been there, done that, and lessons learned, but he realizes that he needs to let me learn those lessons myself. So it's been like a really beautiful journey to, see myself blossom next to him, but
Yeah.
also see how he's been making sure to provide that environment for me.
Mm.
And I think that's what continues to evolve our love, right? To me, that's what
Yeah.
is this like active participation into with each other's life. That is love for me.
Totally. I talked to someone recently who was kind of talking about how we're always inclined to fix and like help the people that we love. And, oh, I've been through this, so I'm going to tell you how to go through it yourself. And real love is saying that I have so much faith in you that you will figure this out, and giving someone the dignity of their own journey.
Yeah.
Truly.
And it takes a lot of patience. Like,
Oh my God.
it sounds so beautiful. Trust me that I seen multiple times on Gary's face where he's just like,
Yes.
he has to breathe. He has to be like, okay, that's fine. Like,
Totally.
I gotta trust the process. So it's a lot of patience. It's a lot of like faith, and it's a lot of everything.
When we first started talking, you and I were saying how as we get older, we're just finding our voice more and feeling more confident in our convictions and our decision making and holding space for ourselves. And we were so different when we met these partners. And I think like something that I'm struggling with that I've heard you talk about is tapping back into that feminine energy, that you're handling stuff, you're handling yourself, you're in this like energy where you're just having to be a boss bitch as we're taught, and all of that. And then you have to come home. And we'd all like to believe that these male stereotypes of like wanting to feel needed and wanting to feel relied on and, all of that is not true, but it's true. It's just that's men, like I feel like in a lot of ways that's who they are. Mm-hmm. So tapping back into that feminine energy, being more submissive at certain times has been so hard for me. Like, what is that journey like for you?
It's very hard. And you know what? It's very hard because not a lot of people talk about it, but motherhood is very masculine. It's a lot of like doing, fixing, figuring out, protecting. So there are, a lot of people confuse this masculine feminine as like, oh, you're submissive and you're at home and you make cupcakes. And masculine is you go and make money. There's so much more to it. And I think that for women today, it's definitely difficult to tap into the feminine because we live in a very masculine energy world, and we've come to a place in society where we honestly can do anything we want. And it comes with the price as well. And that's the price. The price is that we get disconnected from our bodies. We get disconnected from a lot of feminine, like intuition. And then we kind of get ourselves sick. If you actually look, aside from all this fluffy, like energy masculine, if you actually look at data, like health wise and health statistics, women are more prone to depression. Women are more prone to heart strokes and heart attacks. Like there's just, it shows you in the data that we are disconnecting from our bodies, from our intuition, from how it feels inside. And that is the feminine energy. So it's very difficult. I honestly learned to scare myself a little bit into finding ways to reconnect to that.
Honestly, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't want to die. I don't want to be depressed.
Yeah.
So I am very much trying to actively create ways for me to lean more into the fact that it's very hard. It's very, very hard. I think that the being playful and just be creative has helped me a lot to tap into that. And that surrender process of just like not trying to control every single outcome. It's also been a wonderful like lesson for me in how to reconnect to that. But I'm still figuring it out.
No, it's really hard. And I like that you said, like, yeah, we can talk about tap into your feminine, dude. Like, it is way more conscious than you think. I think I was first noticing it because like of when I would want to have sex, right? Like I'd be like, okay, mornings, because at night I've just come from this entire day of, owning my company, like making decisions, like doing all that stuff. And then I'm like, I want to boss you around more and tell you that like you have, something on your face and can I pick that zit? Can I,
but it's not even that you want to, it's like you're on autopilot.
Yes. I think I wanted to have sex in the morning because that's when I was most in my feminine. Like I was just waking up, I was softer, but I was like, okay, how do I take that and apply it to other parts of my life? And it really is like, I hate to say it, I am a feminist. I don't think this is anti-feminist. I actually think this is part of that. Absolutely. Is like, saying sometimes like, you handle that. You can do that. I don't need to make this decision. I don't need to control you. And it's hard. It's hard because you're like, I have the right answer. I know how to do this. I'm going to do this myself. It is like this, and it's necessary. I think so often we're focused on how it makes them feel, which is obviously important.
Yeah.
But it's like, I was not in my yin and feminine energy at all. At all. And I was actually fearful of it. Did you have that experience?
I think I was fearful of it because I wanted to prove something to myself. And it was back in like that girl boss era. And it was also, again, in the season of life of me, just like I needed to very much like define who I am. So I was very much in that headspace. So yeah, I was definitely disconnected from it. I would say that I was the most tapped into it in the beginning of our relationship, in the beginning of our marriage. It felt very different. And you know what? I think that it's always this balancing act with the two energies. So you never like have it completely figured out. It's really more about that connection to the body, intuition, and self-awareness. It's like I see in my relationship, right, where I'm feeling off and then he's feeling off and we're kind of butting heads. I'm just like, I feel like I'm bringing the wrong energy here, because at the end of the day, I can only focus on what I bring forward, not what he.
Yeah.
Right. The neck. Remember the neck. So if I'm positioning, myself in a certain situation, it gives him feedback of how to position himself. And it's just an overall, a better like way to approach a lot of balances in the household when they happen.
Yeah, I think as women, we kind of learn to leave our bodies early. We learn to disassociate. For women, we have to like push so much aside to tap back into our body. And it's like usually the last thing on our priority list.
No, it's insane. It's actually insane. I know that I remember last year I made a conscious decision. I'm like, I need to tap back into my sensuality. Like I want to develop the senses because lose them, right? I don't practice it. And it's a practice. If you don't practice it, you lose it. And it's been really interesting to try to navigate womanhood in general, because again, based on seasons, your priority list is shifting every day. Like the day I woke up and my two kids are sick, I'm like, I'm not fucking thinking about my sensuality or if I'm
Right.
connected to yin or yang. I'm just trying to survive here.
100%.
So it's always something.
So, just lastly, I want to know just how I feel like your content has changed recently in such a beautiful way that really represents just your growth. And I like when you recently, because you're so communicative, and I think that's just a lesson in life, like generally, whenever you're afraid of people misunderstanding you, or whenever you're afraid of people assuming something, like communication is always the best way, and you've always had that with your audience. And so I loved when you were talking about how you've moved away kind of from these family vlogs, and in large part because your boys are getting older and you have a camera in their face and you're like, this doesn't feel like me anymore.
No.
Do you feel like you are wrestling with privacy? Do you feel like you have a stance on it, or are you still figuring it out?
I have to say, I actually feel pretty private. Like I don't, a lot of people know what's going on in my life.
But they think they do, which is the magic trick.
The beautiful thing is that I do share the things that I care to share, and I share them because I feel like there's going to be value coming out of it, rather than just for my own ego purposes or feeling like my audience can connect or I'm vulnerable enough. It's never this play of, there's something beneficial for me. I always think about these things a lot before I post them. But yes, I very much pick and choose what I share and when I share it. I often talk about the fact that I never share things that I haven't made a decision on yet. So if it's an open-ended, question, it is not open to the public until I
Yes.
close it and I have a very concrete decision there. I just don't think it's the right thing to do for me. I don't think it's accurate to open it up for others to put their feedback in. So, yeah, I think that I live a private life, keeping things to myself and to my family that are sacred to me. But otherwise, I do look at what I do. I mean, it is a passion of mine. I find it to be an art of communication and of, human connection, and I love it. And I approach it in that way. So I used to have no boundaries because I just didn't know that I needed to have them. And then as I continued developing in this space, I started building those around me, and it feels amazing. It feels so like liberating.
Yeah, no, I that resonates with me so much, and I think you can relate to it even if you don't have a public-facing career. It's even just like I would be a chronic oversharer just to fill the space around, if I was having a conversation. And I think like I read the Brene Brown book. I think it was like The Gift of Imperfection, and she talks about how she wouldn't share anything until it was processed with her or her family, or it was resolved in some capacity. Like, of course, you can still have questions and stuff, but there is dignity in processing it yourself and talking through it with your therapist or your partner, and not just working through it in front of the public eye. And I think I had to reestablish or redefine privacy versus secrecy, which for me, I was always like, oh, am I painting an image of perfection if I'm not sharing this? And I felt like people liking me was based on how much I would share.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right. Like because even like you can think of it from another standpoint, which is that there's nothing to be gained in just you oversharing and spiraling and dumping on people. There is so much power in like, okay, I've actually thought about this, and this, my family is safe. I just think that's such a beautiful transition that probably so much of your audience who are in similar ages are feeling too. And it's mirrored in your content.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I think that in the last, I would say in the last year, I've moved from calling myself an influencer to calling myself a thought leader. And
I
for
like
me, a thought leader is exactly that. The messages that I put out there are thought starters, but those messages have already been, thought about, figured out, broken down, thought about how they can contribute to the world. That to me is what I do now. So that truly leads a lot of the decisions that I make regarding my content.
No, I'm so inspired by you. I loved this so much.
Thank you. This is so fun.
Thank you for like changing my mind on so many things. I'm like, I'm gonna have a baby tomorrow. It's over. It's gonna happen. I'm done.
I love it. I mean, you know where to find me, babe. Whenever you need anything, you just call me up. I'm here.
I will. No, I really will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jade. It was amazing.